Today's video is brought to you by Bespoke Post. Fellas, Bespoke Post is a monthly membership club that delivers awesome boxes of top shelf goods right to your door. They feature products from under the radar brands, majority of which are sourced from small brands, many of which are based in the US. Every month they offer a new lineup of themed boxes full of cool new products ranging from outdoor gear, clothing, kitchen goods, barware, and even live oysters. It's free to join and you can cancel and skip months anytime. Just take a short quiz so Bespoke can recommend the best boxes of awesome tailored for your interests. And you can even preview it before it's shipped. And if you don't like it, you can swap it out for another box or cancel that month free of charge. I selected Scorch, which comes included with 6 specialty hot sauces. My favorite being the one-legged chicken and this dram, which includes 2 whiskey glasses, an ice ball mold, and an old-fashioned mixer with a field guide to whiskey by Hans of Fringa. Perfect for my gents out there. Each of these is worth around $70, but they're bespoke. They are a fraction of the cost. And to get 20% off on your first box of awesome, down below in the description will be a link where you can use code Aztecross20 for that 20% discount at checkout. Feel free, guys, to check out BespokePost.com/Aztecross20 to automatically get that discount for any of the products at this website. Again, big shout out to Bespoke for sponsoring today's video. So the hand cannon Rose is returning to us as the competitive reward next season. Now, some key things to actually take away from that conversation in the TWAB. Rose will be the first of its kind, essentially labeled as a hybrid. It will fire like a 140 round per minute hand cannon, but it will allow you to move like a 150 round per minute hand cannon, and has the stats that blend the two. Now, if you remember way back when, guys, before Beyond Light, 150 round per minute hand cannons were the meta. A huge reason why Thorn was so dominant back then was because it was a 150. Waking Vigil, one of my favorite 150s in the game, phenomenal. And even though you had hard hitters like Ace of Spades with Memento Mori, it being a 140, 150s could still outcompete 140s within its intended ranges. But a lot of things have happened since then. Hand cannons across the board got range nerfs. Subsequently, 150s were deprecated and essentially converted to 140s. And a huge problem with this is that most of the 150s never got the stat bumps that 140s intrinsically have. You see, the original benefit that a 140 round per minute hand cannon had over a 150 was that it had more range and normally all around better stats. But because of its 140 rate of fire, it was locked at a 0.87 time to kill value. Granted, it required you to still get 3 crits, whereas 150s also required you to get 3 crits, but it had a 0.8 second TTK. And even though most people think that 0.07 seconds wouldn't make that big of a difference, it actually does. Now, one of my biggest complaints about Thorn, especially even in this sandbox, I know it's good. I love Thorn. I love it with necrotic grips. I love the synergy, and I know with Soul Devour, Thorn is fantastic. But in 1v1 scenarios, primarily in things like Trials with Cyrus, most people are going to choose a hand cannon that has more range. Thorn by default has very poor range, and that was because it was intended to be a 150. It was originally a 150. Now, we bring up Rose in this conversation because this too was also a 150 round per minute hand cannon, and this is why it's actually returning to us as a hybrid. It'll shoot as a 140, but it will most likely have lightweight intrinsically. And again, the beautiful thing about lightweight is the faster movement, the quick handling. These are all very beneficial things to have on your weapons. I normally would choose a lightweight shotgun over another archetype of shotgun, even though maybe a precision frame or an aggressive would actually land me the one-hit kill more often. But because of the movement benefits that lightweights offer, a lot of times it's worth using. Now, there's also going to be random rolled grips instead of an origin trait here on Rose. So if you look at things like Hawkmoon also has a variety of grips present that you can get as randomly rolled. And this does make a big difference, guys, on your weapon. We're talking grips that increase stability but hurts handling. Some grips just outright increase both of those stats. You even have things like Combat Grip, which is directly tied to increasing that recoil direction. We're going to see exactly how many grips we have available for Rose. Would I have preferred an origin trait? Actually, I would have. Considering this is going to be a lightweight hand cannon, handling for the most part by default is going to feel really, really good on this gun. If it's still the same base stats that we see with the original Rose now, then stability would be very, very nice. So I would probably go with like smooth grip, which can benefit both handling and stability. Not necessarily heavy grip because that does hurt handling, but considering this is also a lightweight hand cannon, you could lose out a little bit on handling there and bump everything for stability. And stability is a lot more important now than what it was years ago, especially before Beyond Light. Nobody cared about stability. It was not a stat necessary, especially for mouse and keyboard players. You could sit there and literally lay on the trigger as fast as you want on mouse and keyboard and still land all of your shots. But today, though, stability is a very important stat, not only for consistency, but also mitigating the flinch that you are receiving while taking gunfire. So it's definitely not a stat to overlook. With that being said, this is not going to be another Luna's How Not Forgotten situation where you have to get a certain rank. There's simply going to be an intro quests, which is once per character, and you get a drop with the perk selection Rose originally had, meaning Chamber Compensator, Archetype Rounds, Outlaw, and this Polymer Grip. Then after that intro quest, you have a character-based weekly competitive division challenge to earn another role. And at least from what we're observing, you just have to play competitive every week, essentially a participation thing, and you earn one role a week per character. So depending on what we have in terms of random roles here present on Rose, locking in that God role may take a second, similar to that of like a raid weapon, right? But at least you know you're getting a guaranteed one every single week per character. Now, with all of that being said, I do want to bring up the point of today's video, which is 150 round per minute hand cannons. You see, guys, Bungie has deprecated weapon types in the past. They've deprecated mods, they've scrapped entire systems, but I do find myself scratching my head wondering, what would 150 round per minute hand cannons be like in this sandbox? Again, the benefit that 150s presented was a faster TTK value of 0.8 seconds, but shorter range. And for the most part, 140s were superior stat-wise. But because stability didn't really matter as much back then, and it wasn't really tied intrinsically to flinch resist, the only thing you had to worry about when using a 150 was just closing the gap. On top of that, other archetypes of weapons weren't really competitive. We weren't really concerned with scout rifles or pulse rifles. SMGs were still pretty decent, but just not as plentiful and not nearly as lethal as they are today. And sidearms are definitely way better now than they've ever been. And we've seen major fluctuations in our metas before, literally naming out metas based on their archetype. Most people remember the 120 round per minute hand cannon meta. You had hand cannons that could reach almost up to 40 meters. That were also super forgiving. I don't believe 150 round per minute hand cannons were nearly that dominant. Not enough to actually define a meta. People remember the 600 round per minute auto rifle meta, or the Uriel's Gift 450 round per minute auto rifle meta, or even the 120 hand cannon meta, or hell, back inside of Destiny 1, the Clever Dragon meta, which was essentially any rapid fire frame pulse rifle, but nobody had access to Grasp unless they farmed their booties off at Omnigul. But everybody had access to Clever Dragon with Iron Banner. These were very much defining metas. 150s were not at that level. And I would say the only potency that they possessed was mainly on mouse and keyboard, and mainly when other weapon types were so weak. When we go through the list of different archetypes of weapons present right now that are really, really good, TTK-wise, pulse rifles are some of the best. High-impact pulse rifles, like Stars and Shadow, or Messenger, or New Purpose from the Duality Dungeon, have a 0.67 TTK. Aggressives have a 0.73 time to kill value. Rapid-fire pulse rifles have a 0.8 second time to kill value. Auto rifles live within that 0.77 time to kill, all the way up to 0.83. Some machine guns are very healthy at 0.67 TTK values for things like Multimac, Funnel Well, and this barely goes up to 0.8 seconds for precisions that have incredible range, like Inyos or Shayura's Wrath. And we're not even talking things like Terabug, which can get down to 0.53 seconds in its TTK. Sidearms, which sit around a 0.6 second time to kill value and barely cracks over 0.73, are all extremely deadly. And considering these sidearm buffs and the introduction of airborne effectiveness, sidearms are only on the rise. Scout rifles are the only thing that is somewhat in line, but again, within its intended range, they're hard to beat. High impacts have a 0.8 second TTK, and precisions are at 1 second, but again, if you're rocking things like box breathing on the likes of Hung Jury, you can get down to 0.67, which brings us to hand cannons. Now, obviously, hand cannons are still really, really good, especially if you like to play peak oriented, but hand cannons have actually been indirectly nerfed with the airborne effectiveness change. Can you still jump in the air? Yes. Can you land some of your shots? Somewhat. Is it more difficult though, especially in comparison to what it was before? Absolutely. Hand cannons, like most of our other weapons, do require you to square up. And although I do love the diversity in our metas, when we actually look at the list of hand cannons we have present, look how many 140s we have. It's insane. And it's simply because so many 150s were deprecated into 140s without getting the right stat bumps allocated. Sunshot is the only 150 in the game, and even though it has a 0.8 second TTK, no one's exactly jumping up to use Sunshot. I love Sunshot, but what's its most limiting factor? That range stat is terrible. And I know it has explosive rounds and the extra flinch it offers. It's healthy max size now because again, it used to have a terrible max size. At the end of the day though, no one's really jumping up to use Sunshot, which actually makes me think that bringing Rose back as a hybrid, which is a really cool concept, is great and all, but what if it actually came back as a 150? What if 150 round per minute hand cannons actually became a thing in Destiny 2 again? I love Waking Vigil, guys. I really do. But even getting Waking Vigil and maxing its range stats out as much as we can, it still falls short of so many 140s because by default, its range is only a good range stat on a 150. And the same goes for Rose. And again, Bungie may come out here and actually give us better range stats for Rose. They may even slap on things like Range Finder. Who knows? But the point I'm trying to make is back in the day, I kind of understood the logic of why 150s were deprecated into 140s. But in today's sandbox, with the lethality that so many other different weapon types have, having a 150 round per minute minute hand cannon with its limited range, but its faster TTK, just slightly, is still not that fast, especially in comparison to so many other different weapon types. I would love to see Rose return to us as a 150, to not only be this hybrid lightweight, but to actually be a true 150 round per minute hand cannon. We'll see what ends up happening. And again, we're so close to the new season, I highly doubt this is going to change anything. Rose is still a phenomenal hand cannon, even now. It's limited for sure in its stats, but hopefully with the right trade combinations, this is going to be a weapon worth going after next season. The competitive playlist literally depends on it. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.